Hello to the world and to the kingdom citizens. I greet you in the precious holy name of Yeshua Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, who said in his word, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Hi, I'm Dr. John Curry, Pan-African, and welcome to the embassy of the kingdom of heaven on earth. If you want to follow this podcast, please subscribe to JC Global Embassy TV1. Ring the bell and hit the thumbs up button. Today's message is entitled, The Black African Diaspora Speaks, number 5. And number 5 is re-examining the Constitution. Re-examining the Constitution. We want to go in and see what America's Constitution is all about. What is America's Constitution is all about, and how did American Constitution affect the black slave? If we go back to 1775 through 1783, the Revolutionary War was fought to free the American white man from the British white man. And it was fought in order to make them free. But if we go down, we see that the Constitution had different types of tenets. And many think that President Barack Obama was the first black president, but there are some studies and historians say there's at least 5 mulatto black presidents. But here we have in 1781, we have John Henson is noted as the first black president of the United States. And President Andrew Jackson, some historians say his mother was a black prostitute brought to America by British soldiers. Also, here's something that's very, very significant that I think many do not want to acknowledge. And that is in 1778, there was a 3/5 clause, Article 1, Section 2, defined a black slave as property and equal to 3/5 of a man, despite the assertion of the Declaration of Independence that said all men are created equal. Now, what makes this difficult for some people to understand is that American Constitution had it embedded in the law, in the Constitution, that black people, concerning this 3/5 clause, Article 1, Section 2, defined blacks as slave as property equal to 3/5 of a man. Now the question is, how can you become 3/5 of a man? What makes you 3/5 of a man? You have everything that a man has. You are a man. You're not a beast of the field. You walk upright. You have the volition of cognitive development. You know how to think. You know how to do what you need to do. But in order for America to be able to get slaves to come to America, they had to demean them and devalue them. And one of the ways of doing that was the 3/5 clause. Article 1, Section 2 defined black slaves as property equal to 3/5 of a man. Now we know that the Declaration of Independence said that all men are created equal. Now just in that is a paradox, it's a schism, it's a trick, it's a mental trick in order to get one to think that I'm better, I'm supreme than these black folks, so we're going to label them this so it makes it easy for our conscience to bring them and make them as slaves. Note this also, in 1787, the United States Constitution was written and is not and has not ever, and when I say ever, I mean ever, has not ever been colorblind. It has always been race specific. And it was not only race specific, but it was race specific and color conscious. You see, what makes this very interesting to understand is race specific and color conscious. According to Dr. Claude Anderson, the founding fathers were the ones to play the race card. They started out with the race card. America essentially has 2 constitutions. And I know sometimes white people like to think that America is this great nation, but America started out with blood and gun and murder and mayhem and killing and violence. And then we have the nerve to wonder why that we are still seeing blood and mayhem, killing and violence because the founding fathers were the founders of that blood and mayhem, murder, and violence. So America essentially has two constitutions, one for whites and one for blacks. The Constitution Amendment 1 through 12 is race specific and empowers the majority of white society. That's what I said. The Constitution Amendment 1 through 12 is race specific and empower the majority of white society. Then we go to 13, we go to the 14th, and we go to the 15th Amendment are all color specific. They give citizenship and empowerment rights to black ex-slaves. Now the question is, do they? Do they really give citizenship and empowerment and rights to black ex-slaves? You see, the 13th Amendment eliminated legal slavery. The 14th Amendment gave blacks equal protection and due process right. Now, if we just look at that the 13th Amendment eliminated legal slavery, but are we really free as black people? The 14th Amendment gave blacks equal protection and due process rights. Do we really have equal protection and due process right? These are things that we have to understand. You see, America has always had two constitutions. As I said, one for blacks and one for whites. And America has never truly really respected blacks as far as the Constitution in the United States. Let us move forward. You see, the 15th Amendment extended voting and other social rights for black people. The majority society has co-opted these amendments for other social and political rights. Now, why is that important? Here we are today. Remember, I believe if you go back through time, you'll go back to 1870, where blacks was deemed having a right to vote, in particular black males. And then we'll go all the way up to 1964 or 1954. We get the Voters' Right Bill, 1954. And here we are today, we're still dealing with in 2021, still trying to get black folks to be able to vote. And the reason why is because we're dealing with gerrymandering, and whites are terrified that they're thinking that the black population and other groups have outgrown them, and that is true. So they're doing everything in their power to be able to keep the black vote down, black, brown, and people of color down. But it's important for you to know that the population is growing fast, and as whites have enjoyed the privilege of being majority status, now they must come to the fact of accepting the privilege that they will be in minority status themselves. Now, just as another footnote, there was in 1783, Minister Jesse Peters was the first black minister licensed to control the black slave population. Okay, and how was he controlling it? You know, they ordained him as a minister, Minister Jesse Peters. He controlled it through Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5. Servant, obey them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and singleness of your hearts, as unto Christ. This was the beginning of religion and psychology becoming bedfellows for controlling slaves. Now, this still goes on today. The difference is that they're no longer just being ordained to be on the plantation, but they're now ordained to be on Plantation America as they go to many different cities. These black preachers, not all, but some of these black preachers don't move until the white man said move. And as a result of that, what we find ourselves in a conundrum, because we really want to believe what the black preacher says, but if the black preacher has a slave mind and he's living his life that way, then what we end up doing is continuing the process of being enslaved and doing the stuff that we know we shouldn't be doing. So I just want you to understand that. Now let us move on. Let's go down to this period, 1864 through 1867. We get the Emancipation Proclamation, where slaves were supposed to be made free. Supposed to be. And from the E-Man, we get to Reconstruction. From Reconstruction, we get segregation, we get poverty, and we get voting so-called voting rights. Now, why is this important to talk about? It's important to talk about because it appears that we're moving forward, but yet we're standing still. It appears that the whites wanted to do the right thing, but they really didn't do it. It comes across that white people are playing us, and the fact that they are playing basically a good cop, bad cop. In other words, Republican and Democrats are the same group. I don't know why people have a hard time understanding that. Republicans and Democrats are the same group. And what does that mean? Two voices, one face, white supremacy. So the Democrats will play against the Republicans, and the Republicans will play against the Democrats, and the same enemy that's always been, and that's black folks. When you get through with everything, when you line it all up, it comes right back down to black people. They're terrified of black people gaining power and control of this nation because they know what we can do when we all come together. So I just want you to understand that. Now note this. Now this is a note for you to note. That right after slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, or shall I say legal slavery, because we're still dealing with illegal slavery now. But right after slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, roughly 20 years had went by. 20 years had went by, and guess what happened? After those 20 years, to let you know the heart of the Europeans, the heart of the white man, what they end up doing, they went over to the continent of Africa. Now, this is a meeting. This is 20 years later after the American slavery ended. The scramble to colonize Africa at the Berlin Brussels Conference of the Congo ended in 1884. They went over to Africa. They had a meeting in order to see who was going to carve up Africa, and the European nations, in order to conquer it, they went into colonialism. And as you can see, what they ended up doing, they ended slavery, pulled themselves back together, and 20 years later, they went over to Africa to bring in colonialism. And Africa is still struggling with that right now. Now, that's important for you to know because of the nations that went over to be involved in colonialism in order to conquer Africa. We have Australia, Hungary, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Spain, and Norway. All of these nations went over to help colonialize our continent, Africa. And now Africa has just came out of colonialism roughly in 1954-55, and they're still struggling trying to bring themselves together. So when you think of Africa, or shall I say Arcabulon, you have to think of Africa with the mindset of the 50s and 60s. They're scrambling, they're struggling. They're still trying to get themselves together because the white man had went over and brutalized them. And in the process of brutalizing them, he caused them to have these particular types of attitudes. So they're dealing with post-traumatic slave syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. In other words, they're dealing with all of the stuff that we dealt with. They're dealing with also Francis Galton, Ernest Rudin, and the introduction to the science of eugenics, talking about the good in stock. They're trying to make black folks, still to this day, trying to make black folks feel that we have no civilization. When in fact, when they went over to Africa, they already knew that we were great people. They just didn't want us to know it. Also, a psychologist by the name of Herbert Spencer took Galston terms of survival of the fittest, and they went out to do some other crazy stuff pertaining to black people. They looked at black people, and they still look at black people and Indians and other groups as the adolescent race with the stage of incomplete growth. Now, why is this important? It's important because if they can get you to believe that you are inferior to them, then they win the quest of dominating the world. You see, the science of eugenics and the practice was done by Adolf Hitler in order to prove the fact that blacks are the inferior race and that whites are the superior race. And the main thing they're afraid of is our melanin. They're terrified of our melanin because they understand that melanin versus eugenics, melanin will always win. So I trust you can receive what you've heard, and I trust that you can search it out for yourself and understand that these things happen to us, but as long as we don't let these things happen in us, we win. So if you want to follow this podcast, go to JC Global Embassy TV1, ring the bell, and hit the thumbs up button. We look forward to seeing you next time.